is that the Biden family has benefited from commercial deals overseas to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. That's not in dispute. That's based on the so-called suspicious activity reports that the Treasury Department has released because a U.S. Senate committee asked for it. These documents show the flow of funds from Russian, Ukrainian, and Chinese sources, among others. So we know there's been a flow of funds. We also know that the people sending that money have very close relationships with the government. So in the case of China, for example, which I believe is the most troubling of the group of foreign donors, you can actually look on the Hunter Biden laptop and find the businessmen who secured these deals for Hunter Biden. There are four gentlemen that are named. If you look at those four gentlemen, each and every one of them has close ties to the highest levels of Chinese intelligence. So, for example, one gentleman who he calls the super chairman, at the same time that Hunter Biden secures a deal with him that translates into about $20 million, that same Chinese businessman is business partners with the Vice Minister of State Security in China, who is responsible for foreign recruitments. This has been reported in Hong Kong. This is not just Peter Schweizer saying it. So you have the flow of funds. You have the flow of funds from foreign parties that are linked to the government and intelligence services. And then you have the third component of this, which is there's no discernible service or product or anything that Hunter Biden has brought to the table. So the question has to be asked, why are foreign actors like these four businessmen in China arranging deals worth tens of millions of dollars to the Bidens and not getting anything in return? And what's important to point out here is that Hunter Biden is the one who's the signatory on these deals, but the laptop also shows that money is fungible within the Biden family. We know that $2 million that arrived from China ended up with his uncle, James Biden. And we also know that Hunter Biden paid some of his father's bills while he was vice president of the United States. So this is not a Hunter Biden question. This is a larger Biden family question.
Now, one of the things that I hear from Democrats is that they say, well, you know, this is kind of common. And look, the Trump family had all sorts of business dealings with Russia. Is that true?
So the Trump family does actually have some deals in China, although they kind of were unwinding. And I raised questions about that and some of the finance deals that Jared Kushner was involved in the Middle East. And those need scrutiny and they need analysis. And by the way, they were scrutinized by the mainstream media. So that's a good thing. The Biden deals weren't, but there's also a crucial difference here in my mind. And that is the deals that the Trumps had with China. The one that really translated into money was a deal that Ivanka Trump had for the manufacturing of shoes and other things in her apparel line. That was a line started, 10, 15 years ago. My point being, those were actual legitimate businesses that predate any involvement in. You certainly need to watch them and be aware of them and take them into account. With the Bidens, we're not talking about that. Hunter Biden, after his father becomes vice president of the United States, suddenly decides he's going to go into international finance, ill-defined. He has no background. He has no experience. And he's not doing deals in London or Tokyo. He immediately goes to Russia, China, and Ukraine for those deals. So I believe all foreign deals should be scrutinized, but you have to differentiate, in my mind, the difference between, say, Michael Bloomberg, who his company Bloomberg has major business dealings in China, which need to be watched. But that's a legitimate business. You cannot compare that to Rosemont Seneca Partners, which is, frankly, in a large extent, a fictitious business entity that was funneling money to Hunter Biden and his family.
Now, what about Trump's relationship with Russia?
Well, there was no question. There were discussions, and there was a sort of verbal agreement to build a Trump Tower in Moscow, but there was no real exchange of money in that case. And again, I would say, look, that deserves scrutiny. But Donald Trump actually has built hotels and condos around the world. Certainly, it's not appropriate to be doing that while you're a candidate or president of the United States. But to somehow put that in a nefarious light when you're ignoring a business that has no history that predates your father being vice president of the United States, and you have zero track record in it, I don't think you can compare those two very effectively. Tony Bobulinski is credible because he provides the actual communications, the comms that took place. I've actually seen the BlackBerries and the phones where this correspondence took place, and it's very straightforward. Number one, Bobulinski released to the Senate and gave to the FBI correspondence that I've seen that shows clearly that they were not to discuss Joe Biden's involvement in the business. There are actual correspondence that Tony Bobulinski has with the business partners where they say, don't bring up the father's name, don't discuss the father in the context of the deals. The family's very skittish about it. In other words, the partners did not say he's not involved. There's a Chinese wall, so to speak, that divides him from these deals. It was, don't discuss it. And then you have correspondence when they're discussing a deal with CEFC. This is a Chinese energy company that is going to be setting up a Chinese energy infrastructure fund in the United States, that the ownership structure is such that 10% was going to be given to Hunter to caretake for the big guy. There's lots of correspondence on the laptop and in Tony Bobulinski's communications where the big guy is the reference for Joe Biden. So that's the first thing to consider. The second thing to consider is there is lots of evidence on the laptop that Joe Biden was familiar with his son's deals. And it's worth looking at kind of the evolution of what Joe Biden has said. When I first broke the story in my book, Secret Empires in 2018 about the Biden family's deals in China, the initial Biden response was, there were no deals. There's nothing to see here. This is fabricated. Then when it was confirmed that, okay, yes, there were deals in China, Joe Biden's position became, well, I never discussed those matters with my son, any of these business dealings. We now know, of course, that Joe Biden flew his son on Air Force Two to China, where Hunter Biden met with those Chinese business partners. And we also know on the laptop that, in fact, there are references to Hunter Biden saying to his business partners, I talked to my father about this deal and he's going to help. So now they've shifted from saying there were no deals, Joe Biden didn't know about the deals, to Joe Biden didn't benefit from those deals or did nothing to help these deals along. And my point is, this is what you need an investigation for. Look, we've got the transference of millions of dollars for no services rendered. Nobody's disputing that. We know the individuals who transferred this money have connections to foreign intelligence services. We know that Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden are close. They communicate all the time. They're not estranged. And we know that there are questions about the posture that the Biden administration has assumed towards China. So my view has always been, this warrants investigation. I'm not saying a crime's been committed. I don't know. I'm not saying that Joe Biden is on the take from the Chinese. We don't know. But I do believe that this deserves serious investigation by a body like a congressional committee that has subpoena power. And it seems to me, if we are prepared to investigate Donald Trump based on an anonymous dossier, and by the way, at least the first 5 or 6 months, I supported that investigation. But if we're prepared to investigate that, Iran-Contra, Bill Clinton and Whitewater, this is much higher in terms of the threshold of evidence and information we have that warrants a look and warrants a subpoena power effort to find out exactly what is going on here.